Hello and welcome back to SHOWstudio. This is our last panel for the couture season autumn-winter 18. We discussed Giambattista Valli this morning, and this afternoon is the moment of Chanel. Chanel that showed in the Grand Palais as usual this morning with a very articulate set. Karl Lagerfeld chose to reproduce the view from his apartment, and it's the River Seine bank with the booksellers, the typical Parisian stalls that sells books. As usually, he reproduces something that exists in Paris inside the Grand Palais. We can discuss this and see what everybody think about it. And he showed a very restrained collection, very gray, black, white, not much color, and very simple. Apparently, he wanted to show a couture that looked more like they were, that wasn't too much flamboyant, but the skills to make it were as complicated and as important as ever. So before starting on the actual collection, I wanted to discuss the fact that Chanel, for the first time in 100 years of history, 108 actually, released results, financial results. They were very secret to the point that some executive didn't know the exact figures of the company. There have been, during Men's Fashion Week in Paris, many rumors about Chanel being bought by one of the other groups, or the Wertheimer family trying to sell because Karl is getting older, because whatever, they are getting older. And so to silence this rumor, they came out with a total financial release. So they showed that they are in between Gucci and Louis Vuitton. So their turnover is a little bit above 9 billion euros, or close to 10 billion euros. They have a net profit of close to 2 billion, which is quite high, but it's literally in between what we know about Gucci and what we think about Louis Vuitton, that never really released specific results for the brand. So it's big, it's high. The spending for fashion shows, marketing and clients entertainment is also around 1.7 billion, which is probably one of the highest in the industry. We know that Chanel tries to have the highest presence in media, in classic media, or probably now even digital media. And we know that they do many shows a year that are very expensive, and we know that they entertain clients in a very lavish way. So all these are the figures that show how the company is big. It's a private company, so they belong 100% to a family, which is very different than being floating on the stock exchange. And so the cash at their disposal is endless. So before talking about the collection, anybody wants to comment on this? No?
I think that, if anything, as you're saying, like, Karl's getting older and older as each year goes by. And I think it was a show of solidarity and trust that they have in him, to show that, like, look, he's aging, but the brand is as strong as ever, and we have complete faith and trust. And for the first time ever, we're going to show you how strong we are in comparison to some of these conglomerates, like the likes of Louis Vuitton and Gucci. So I think, if anything, it's quite a nice show of support for Karl and trust in his direction.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. I didn't read it like that. I thought it was more of a need to show, you know, to stop the talks and to show the size, but that's a very good point. It's a very good support of their design.
He's come under a lot of fire recently for the lack of emphasis and effort he puts into designs and more into set design, and I think that this was to show that, you know, like, don't get it wrong, yes, there has been a change of emphasis as opposed to what traditionally would be. But with that being said, we are still growing, we are still booming, and we're obviously doing something right, and he's obviously doing something right.
Yeah, the growth was also quite spectacular on these figures. It's even more impressive because, you know, it's not 1 + 1, it's 2. It's much more complicated.
You wanted us to introduce ourselves?
Sorry. Well said. That's very rude of me. I apologize.
No, it's just I'm reminding you.
Thank you very much. Can you please introduce yourself?
My name's Amy de la Haye. I'm a curator and dress historian, and I work at London College of Fashion.
Thank you, Amy.
My name's Tayler, and I run a creative and digital agency called The Basement.
I'm Navaz. I'm a freelance writer and editorial consultant. My name's Mandi Lennard, and I run a fashion consultancy called Mandi's Basement Tailor.
And I'm Eden Loweth, and I'm one half of the Design Duo Art School.
And I'm Mimma Viglezio, and I'm the editor of SHOWstudio, and I truly apologize. The problem is no excuse, but we did this to test the sound, and for me, that
Feels
was
like we've done it.
Thank you very much for pointing it out. So, you were saying?
Yeah, I was just saying that a lot of, he's come under a lot of fire for, you know, kind of, has he fallen off? Has he gone a bit crazy? Why are there rockets? Why is he imported
So the
icebergs?
set overshadowed the collections.
Yeah. And I think that this was just, you know, it's really nice to see, because I think that a lot of, as you said, is quite an intimate setting is Carl, and he has direct contact with the people that own the brand. And I think that allows him to build a much more personal relationship in which they can kind of get a more natural insight into his vision and understanding, and then it's a lot easier for them to stand behind him as opposed to setting him aside, like, okay, cool, he's getting too old now, let's cut him out and get someone else new in. Which is what I think would happen with some of the bigger conglomerates that own multiple fashion houses that are owned by them.
It kind of shows how he continues to provide a stability like no other designer has really done at a house of that stature. And it also provides a stability for those couture clients as well, which I think is really important, because at so many of the big houses, there's such a continuous focus on change to create a new hype, which can be a really good thing with like Demna at Balenciaga. But what Carl does provide...
We're talking a very different size, though.
Exactly.
Very different size.
But also what Carl does is provide that stability so that for the family that owns Chanel, they have confidence in what he's going to deliver.
It's extraordinary what he does deliver. I mean, he is incredibly creative and very, very clever about what he does, and which makes his age irrelevant, really, doesn't it?
I think he's even more creative in finding ways to excite. Like, for instance, he embraced the Instagram era by creating more and more elaborate sets that were all over, you know, even people that don't follow fashion, they know about his airport, about his rocket, about the Tour Eiffel 10 meters away from the Tour Eiffel. So I would like to talk about then the collections when we see it. I think he's more of a marketing genius today, to me, apart from what he's done before, than really creative as far as the collections are, you know.
I think in that position, you kind of need to be able to see a lot further than just creating really nice clothing. You need to be able to see the sellability, the marketing, if this outfit's coming out in the catwalk, if people are coming to this space, are they going to be putting it all over their social media? Will this get shared, or will it just get lost amongst the other shows? With that being said, though, I think that this show was really nice because it kind of simplified everything. It was a much more intimate affair, and it did show that from a design perspective, he's still got it. And he didn't need the rockets, he didn't need the icebergs, he didn't need the grocery stores. He just needed a very intimate setting from his bedroom window and what he does best, which was bringing his take on Paris to the forefront of
the brand. What you're very quiet, Mandi, which I don't know if I have to.
Yeah, I've got lots of different thoughts swimming through my head. I mean, you know, the fast fashion is, you know, the British High Street, which we can all comment on, is in the most terrible state at the moment. You know, I was walking through Covent Garden yesterday and there were so many empty retail units, and it's very real in a lot of the rest of the country too. And I think that this show demonstrates how vital couture is. I think that, you know, they're doing well, they're setting the template, and, you know, if you want to just consume, it's much better to concentrate on the quality. And I think that this show is loaded with so many nuances of these kind of messages to the core, to the new customer. So this is so fresh. I think there's some really brilliant, it's like the new Chanel silhouette, the new Chanel suit, in fact. Having Vito Ceretti open the show, she's one of the most versatile models of the moment. I mean, she's so cool, and she's been in like Next Generation Vogue, Craig McDean's shoot with Aduta Ketch, who, as we know, was the bride in this show. But she's still womanly enough to not alienate an older customer. But again, I think when we knew that we were going to be reviewing a couture show, I kind of expected, I don't know, I didn't really have many big expectations. And I think this show is really him flexing that even at this stage of his career, he can put out this incredible collection. And don't forget, tomorrow night he's putting Fendi Couture. I mean, it's amazing.
Yes, well, yeah, no, he is. I mean, and he does much more than even what we see on the catwalk, because then his own collections, the men, all the collaborations. So he is definitely amazing. I'm not that keen on the collection though. But, you know, when I listen to what you guys say, I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm not that keen on the final result of this.
I think Eden and I were talking about this before the show. There's a big issue with catwalk look show pictures, and I think that a lot of the news sites have got to do something about this, because you're just getting like a certain view, and I think the movement of the show, it translated so much better. I wasn't at the show, but I've seen enough Instagram films to get, and you know what you were saying about the colour palette being quite dull. I mean, I think the colour palette is incredible. It's subliminally related to his view of the Seine, and the stone walls, that's the colour palette, but he brings it alive with lurex, glitter, all these incredible tweeds, and the fact that every part of this collection opens and closes. There's a really clever strategy in the design concept, and I think that fabric has got incredible texture, this collection.
I think as well in terms of the movement, like I agree, like when you see those flat stills, you're just seeing one dimension, but actually when you see them from some different angles, or you see like three girls walking from the side, and especially with these pieces, you can see there's a lot going on. There's slits, there's sleeves, the pieces are really three-dimensional, so you do need to see that movement to kind of get it. And also talking about the colour palettes and the lighting and everything, like this has been lit. So if I hadn't been told this was in a setting, I would have thought it was just in the street, and this is natural sunlight, but it's not. It's been lit to look like that, and that really does bring out the beauty and the textures and the colours and the kind of like metallics and all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of, we almost take it for granted, but until someone like verbalises it like that, you're like, okay, this has clearly all been thought through as it would be.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I know that there is incredible technicality and there are skills behind this, and nothing is by chance. Forgive me, I just don't see it very modern.
I think that there's so many stories within this collection. There's a really beautiful cocktail vibe, evening wear. There's this new fresh pagoda sleeve. There's the like cape-like short sleeve, which almost seems one length, but it's actually the sleeve. It's not a cape. I think there's so much fresh output in this show, and also like we've seen in a lot of the couture shows, you know, you have the flou atelier and you have the tailoring atelier, and
they have both.
The dialogue that they have together.
They have both for sure.
This, you know, everything is in-house. I mean, you know, they bought a lot of the artisans in-house, didn't they? They bought a lot of the smaller factories.
It's so important.
And this is the language.
Including, I think, the people that were doing the boucle of the typical tweed. So they knew that, apparently, but it's some time ago. I remember.
There's a real purity, I think.
It was like a small company that were able to do that, and they bought it.
They've also invested a lot into training new people in those crafts as well, which would not happen had they not have invested the money into those small Parisian companies, which is really vital to keep those crafts alive. You can really see that.
I don't know, the shoes with the same fabric as the clothes. There's something subjectively that
people are getting excited about. I mean, I thought
and the hair.
One regular ankle boot in the show I thought seemed a little bit dull, but I noticed on Instagram that everyone was getting excited about the one with the fold over top with the glitter or lurex.
Yes. And what do we think about the hair and makeup?
Incredible.
I love the hair.
Incredible. Sam McKnight and Tom Pesceau. Really, that is great. And Sam McKnight actually just before we started, the original drawing that Karl Lagerfeld gave him for the hair, and how Sam has translated that and made it so youthful and punchy.
Oh, again, it's really, you can see that it's made by, you know,
but this
someone
is
of his
selling.
stature.
You know, the beauty industry's got real issues at the moment because a lot of the independent brands are getting all the piece of the cake. And I think that's why the hair and makeup is so vital for this show, because this is what's selling their makeup ranges in the stores.
I think you definitely see with the Dior's and the Chanel's, especially with their social media, they put as much attention on the beauty when they're doing their show coverage.
That's
in fact,
where
Chanel have
most of the millions come from.
Yeah, of course. And Chanel have several different social media accounts, like they have different Instagram accounts for their beauty. And
Choupette.
That's Carl. That's Carl, yeah.
Maybe Choupette needs to do beauty line. But yeah, I mean, I think hair and makeup is really key. And he always seems to do quite youthful hair and makeup. It's very kind of, it's something that a young person with not much money can easily tap into and just like buy the eyeliner or something. They always do. It's never just completely minimal. There's always something there that you can tap into and buy like the nail polish or something. And that's increasingly, I think that's something that's important.
That's why when you go to a Chanel show that I've done for some years, you always get either a fragrance or the new nail polish, the new color that is not. I mean, that's so big for them. It's so important. You know, the Chanel No. 5, which was created by Coco, is still #1 selling fragrance in the world after what, 70 years, 80 years? So that's the cash cow.
Yeah, and that's how the relationship with the Wertheimer started, wasn't it? Because they manufactured the perfume.
Yes, but I think that the grandfather of the two Wertheimer
Yeah.
now was one of the co-founders of actually, he was one of the financier of Coco.
But definitely the relationship started
Come
with
from the
getting
fragrances.
the perfume, yeah.
I think some other clues that were kind of germinated at this show as well was, I think Penelope Cruz was introduced as the new face of Chanel, and she's actually the face of Cruz, I think, which he's rebranding as Voyage because he feels that Cruz isn't luxury enough, which made me chuckle because when I first got into fashion, Sonia Rykiel was the only brand that I was aware of that did Cruz, and that was the whole luxury of people going abroad in winter and buying a new relevant summer wardrobe.
You're looking at me.
No, and also Margot Robbie, who wasn't at the show, that was announced on the website, I think, yesterday or today, about how this month Coco Neige is the new brand that they're launching in July.
They are uniquely extraordinary in that, you know, he casts the right girls, he has the right campaign, I'm just full of admiration for that. I just cannot see the modernity in those looks. I mean, I just saw the photo of Penelope Cruz in pink. It doesn't do it.
It was a crowd-pleasing look she was wearing.
Totally crowd-pleasing, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about the collection?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at it, because I haven't got all the contemporary references. I suppose I'm looking at it, I can see references from the 80s, but I do think, and earlier, but I do think the sort of the cuts and the layering is interesting. I think it's quite understated for a couture show, and I think that's quite appealing.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. I think it's good.
And then just while we're looking at these images, it just made me think about from the 1920s when Chanel was always used to say, you know, unless fashion goes down to the streets, it's not really fashion. And it's quite interesting situating it in the context of the street, and it doesn't look bizarre. It's extraordinary quality, but I suppose it's eminently wearable. It's mature, but because of the cutouts, and like you said, when you see it in movement, it just becomes animated. I like some more than others.
Also, Carl is always very generous in the quantity of looks that he.
That's 70, isn't it?
Provides. No, this is a little bit less, but it's good for couture. It's big, so it's fewer than usual, but it's quite big for couture. And what do we think about that new thing that new idea of the double skirt, so the mini skirt underneath the long skirt, and there actually is a zip, so you can cover your legs. That's rather clever commercially.
I think the zips is an interesting thing in couture as well, because I think the Chambre Syndicale actually banned zips at one point. So you've got a couture show here where actually the zip is quite significant.
And it would be nice to see them too, because I bet they're really, really beautiful zips.
I think he has put stones in it and embellished the zips as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It would make sense.
An interview with Godfrey Dini where he mentioned that.
The thing is, you need to see these things up close. I think, did you say that? I think you kind of, when you go into the showroom, quite often they do like a press presentation after the show, like a few weeks later, and you can see everything up close. And it's incredible when you, you can usually zoom in on Vogue runway as well. And that's when you really appreciate all the details, and sometimes things look really simple, but actually you go in close and there's so many different layers to one piece and different things going on. So
I like the split sleeves. They're like historical menswear, but they are like a cross between tailoring and dressmaking, aren't they? Because they do look a bit like a sort of cape or drapey, but they are tailored.
There's also the Virgil Abloh split trouser leg as well for Louis Vuitton that he wore at the Met. He showcased at the Met Gala first. That was the first look of Louis Vuitton that was revealed, that detail.
I like the fact that it's in between a jacket and a cape.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting that when you look at this, the most luxurious fabrics on the inside, and it's that whole thing about sort of haute couture was that it's not just about sort of conspicuous consumption and showing, it's about the pleasure for the wearer, and you know, there's the beauty that you look at the make and the quality and the feel, and it's quite nice that they're seemingly quite utilitarian on the outside, and then they've got these really luxury sort of brocades and silks on the inside.
I don't feel that the collection's restrained as in, you know, wanting not to have gimmicks, because I think he's the first one that would have something fun, you know, to pep it up. I think that that's just how fashion's going at the moment. I think that, you know, youthful dressing on a couture level is this kind of restraint anyway.
I think you said it before, and it's very interesting. Like there is a sort of also a crisis of too much stuff, too much, you know, and so we've seen it also in the men's shows, and we're seeing it here, and in this couture season, restraint is the new trend. And it's about simplicity but quality, you know, things that are more timeless, that can last, etc., etc. I miss a little bit the color here, but that's subjective. But yeah, and there is this need of those that can to show that they can do something really extraordinary, you know. And couture today wouldn't be relevant. It's not couture. It's not about revolutionizing fashion every season. It's about showing what you can do with.
Also, I wonder if, just looking on the screen, it looks, I mean, they look grey, but I think if we have the fabrics in front of us, they're going to be exquisite, sort of subtly exquisite, because they will be woven with different
bits of heather or lavender or like nuanced colours in their shade.
And in some ways, that is the skill of real quality, isn't it? Because it's dead easy to do bright colours, but to get that sort of melange of really subtle colours and different textures that you sort of discern when you see it close up is, I mean, that is the skill of really beautiful weaving.
What is more surprising for me, it's a mainly day collection for couture, and usually we think about couture for red carpet, for big, you know, for weddings, for big events, and I never really thought about couture. This is really a day wear collection, right?
I think there's a lot of evening wear in there as well.
Yeah, but I do.
You know, there is a lot of day or up to cocktail, if this still means something, because then people can.
But it's quite far removed from ladies who lunch.
It feels quite relatable, I think.
I feel like it's more mixed up. I feel like it's kind of like mashed up together, and that again is how people wear. We're 24-hour people. You know, you go out in the morning, and you don't get back till 2 a.m. maybe, and you have to kind of change things up. You just like mix it all together. Put your ankle boots on.
Certainly elegant enough for anything like that, but you wouldn't go to an Oscar red carpet with that. That's not what it is for.
I think you would. With some
I could see someone wearing that.
And I think you could wear shorter now on the red carpet too.
Yes, but there are some suits that would not be.
With the whole gender neutral thing, they can wear the pantsuits. It's fine.
You'd unzip the sleeves and you would have
I was thinking about the classical suit with the skirt up here. You know, the classical Chanel suit. The American girls, especially, would not wear it on the red carpet. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying that usually in the couture, especially at Chanel, you see these gowns that then you know you will be seeing at the Oscars or whatever. Here, it's much more showing that it's for every day, it's for the street as well, which is probably more relevant.
So you pick up on that because I think that, you know, in its heyday, he's still having it, but you know, in the you know, when everyone aspired to having a Chanel bag, it was always the suit. So the tweed, it was always the idea that you'd have a two-piece of some kind. But I don't know, I think there's a real danger in the actual world of luxury and actually how the customer is held by the hand and seduced by couture, because you know, fashion is very intimidating. If you're somebody who wants to have a relationship with a maison and maybe have a couture gown made, how do you actually initiate that relationship? Because when you go into luxury stores, first of all, they'll look the same wherever you go in the world. No, why bother going to the Chanel store when you're on holiday? It's going to have the same stuff they've got in London.
Yes.
I don't get that. And they all say they're site specific. They're not. They've all practically got the same interior. You know, all the brands seem to do this, and it's just something that I find really, really strange. And they all have this iPad, well, a lot of them have this iPad system and they expect you to know it as well. So if you haven't actually shopped at one of those stores before and you want to, even as a customer, go to the store, which is actually the window on the relationship is the store.
Yeah, you want the experience.
Yeah. First of all, the staff haven't got the same knowledge as you, because you can pick up more on Instagram and know more than the actual staff in the store. So you can say, oh, when's the cruise collection arriving? They might know that. But when you say, did you get this style? There's this kind of jarring, because they don't know. They have to get out their little booklet or whatever. It's a very strange thing, and it's almost like there's no intimacy. You almost need a private lounge where you can actually give a customer the time that they deserve, rather than say, are you on the iPad list yet? It's outrageous.
It's too transactional.
Yeah.
Is that what they do at Chanel?
They do it in a lot internationally in Louis Vuitton, Chanel. It's regular practice. I think Dior might do it too. And it's that for me is not luxury shopping. There's got to be something in between that can give you that level of service and intimacy and time. That you've got to luxuriate in time when you talk about luxury as well.
Yeah, but most of the big brands, they even have VIP floors in their big flagships, and it's not that I go to these places every day, but it never happened to me that they ask you if you're on their list before showing you a product.
But why should you? Because they're so busy and there's queues whenever.
Chanel for sure.
We know that Louis Vuitton have got the apartment above the store in London, and I've been to some of their trunk shows, and that's a nice way of stroking the customer, involving them, letting them know about things early. But there's got to be something. It's got to be that exclusivity, because at the other end of the coin, while all these stores are closing, Primark is booming. So it's almost like you've got to offer that customer something to the nth degree to actually. I'm not saying that the high street's not going to start ripping off these straight away. I think there's loads of stuff in there that's going to prompt trends, ideas.
I think what you're saying about the store experience, it's a whole other panel. It's very important, because all these brands that have huge amount of money blocked in real estate, that now doesn't make as much sense. I remember when I started in the industry, the objective was to have 10 more stores than Chanel or than Vuitton, depending who you were, and the first thing you were declaring to the press, I have 387 stores or whatever. All the same, with the same furniture, the same design. Today, that's a lot of real estate that is not that useful anymore, because people don't care about that. And Miuccia was the first one to work with different Miuccia Prada, to work with different architects and to give different experiences according also to the country the store was in. So I think all of that is going to change.
I mean, Chanel doing the Serpentine, that was a very significant thing. But even with that, again, it's not a couture event, it's a Chanel event. There were some very mainstream celebrities there. And I just think that you have to really guard your brand so carefully. All these nuances, every level, your ambassador, identifying them, how you host them. It's got to really be at the highest level. There's something missing for me.
Don't forget also that Chanel, by the way, I noticed that in this show there were no bags, which is very rare. There was no, maybe in couture.
I think they've got a real issue with the bag, Chanel. I think they're losing a hell of a lot of the bag market. I don't think it's as aspirational.
The money comes from the color and the fragrances and the makeup and the skincare.
I think it's okay. This show is setting a tone. This show is got a beautiful purity about it, and it's flexing the brand where it wants to be. So they can have drops throughout the year and have satellite launches and all that kind of thing. That's fine. But at the moment, I don't feel there is desirable bags. I really don't. No. I think I think that Balenciaga are getting a huge piece of that pie.
Yeah, but Chanel, don't forget that we know about Balenciaga and we're more attracted to that for obvious reasons, but the double C of Chanel has a meaning that is huge all over the world. Even, and especially people that don't really follow fashion.
It's funny you should say that, because I think that a fashion person who speaks our language doesn't want double C on their handbag.
No, I agree.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And I also know from data that I researched that in the resale market, which is very big right now, The typical Chanel bag, the black with the gold chain, lasts like 24 hours. It's the first thing that it's sold. Then you might think that probably Gucci now is growing because, you know, because it's a very fashionable brand at the moment and people want to buy a bargain. Yes, but that's not always why Chanel, the resale value of Chanel is one of the highest, and that shows how powerful the brand is.
I think if they get that bag offer right, it would be even more impactful. Like you said, that their position between Gucci and
But do they want
another.
that? Do they want that? I don't think they need that. They're up to 10 billion without trying to be the trendiest brand of the moment.
I think, you know, you can't become complacent. You can get stale so quickly, which is why it's so refreshing to see these beautiful silhouettes in this show, almost like puffball shapes, peplums. I think there's so many new ideas. It's great. It needed that for me.
Do you think it's very conventionally feminine? Earlier you'd mentioned about sort of gender-neutral fashions, and Chanel historically were always known for, you know, using menswear references. It is quite conventionally feminine. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it is, isn't it?
It's still got the tomboy edge, though, hasn't it, that it needs?
And you could wear...
Youthful.
Yeah.
I really don't see that. But, you know, again, I respect, but I really don't see that. I would like to hear what the others think.
I think the double skirts for me are something, I mean, I'd wear that. But I also think, I completely see a gender neutral
Do you?
focus here. Yeah, absolutely. I think it feels as a younger person quite refreshing to see this. And I think compared to previous shows, it feels a lot less stuffy, a lot less restricted, particularly within the hair and makeup and the casting. It could still probably do a lot better with the casting, but it's probably not going to change because it's a couture show. But I think, where it succeeds the most for me is within the suiting and within those double skirts. And it feels like it, and also I really like these puffball shapes. I think they're really fresh and quite, in a way, hypey. I can see those becoming quite a thing, particularly that one on the right. And the gloves as well. I think
that's
really
complete
popular.
red carpet, the one on the right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, that could be. With probably different shoes, yeah. I don't think it will happen, but the red carpets are not, for me, they're not the best fashion events ever, but Tayler?
I just love the colour palette, to be entirely honest. I think that if you look at the colours, it just represents what you'd see in Paris. I feel like he literally looked outside of his window.
That's for sure.
Looked at the colours and thought, I'm going to incorporate every single colour, you know, from the morning to the evening to the late afternoon. And I love it. I'm not, you know, an expert when it comes to couture or Chanel even, but I think from my perspective, what I can appreciate is that this show is a lot more toned down. It's a lot more about the details and the design behind. Even looking at like the little bits of rust on the lock on the bins and stuff, and like the detail in that. And I think it was the couture show that was the Chanel grocery store, and each product wasn't just like a box. It was actually filled with something.
Yeah,
and
it was
you could actually scan out the items, and I think that was one of my favorite parts of the show because it was functional, and it's representative of Stanley Kubrick famously said on one of his sets that there was a scene in which there was a wardrobe, and he demanded the wardrobe was filled with clothing, and people were like, "Why? It doesn't matter. The wardrobe doesn't get open." And it's like because that wardrobe being filled with clothing gives it a different energy than if it was empty.
Oh, I agree. But so you think that was necessary to fill the supermarket?
Oh, most definitely. I feel like it's something that you can't like tangibly say, okay, cool, it does this, but you feel like you're actually there, and it gives everyone a sort of feeling, and it puts them right in that moment. So I think that he's done that conveyed that really well. I think he's put everyone in his bedroom window really, really well, and everyone's looking out and seeing exactly what he saw when he
They did that with the show, didn't they? Because I think all the literature in these little books.
They were actual books.
They were like second-hand Chanel literature.
Yeah. Oh, they all reference to
the
Coco's.
detail.
Yeah.
Literally. And I think that...
that's for sure. It will never be stuff there by chance, you know.
No, of course. I think those were even takeaways for the guests, weren't they? Some of the books were, I think I read earlier, were takeaways for the guests. It was almost like...
They want people to want to take things and
it's
like the
behind with the
supermarket, they ask
trolley.
people to actually do that.
Not very many though.
You were talking about earlier about like accessibility and the fact there's such an emphasis on makeup and hair because those products come in at such a cheaper price point. It's like, okay, everybody in that room, only a handful of them are going to go and actually buy these pieces, but everybody can have a chance to take away a book because it's free, and everybody can have a little bit of Carl's imagination, Carl's bedroom window.
It's like the nail polish that you find on your chair when you go to one of their
Exactly.
shows. You know, and Coco Chanel, when she started with the lipstick, and so practically this brand started the branded cosmetics, and she was saying, I want everybody to be able to have a piece of Chanel in their pocket.
But that's
so
what
even
this
if
is
it's an
selling.
expensive lipstick, you can afford it more than
That's what this is selling. I got a Chanel mascara last week, and I bought it because I was convinced by what it said it did, and I tried it on and it was great, nice quality, and I thought the packaging was really original and I liked the look of it. But then I read in one of the Sunday supplements that it was actually 3D printed, and that's why it looked how it did, and it was a 3D printed wand, and I just thought, that's a bit gimmicky. It doesn't need to go down this road.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But it explained why the case was rough. It looked like a 3D printed.
And there was Chanel, you said.
Yeah.
I didn't understand hear the beginning. There was Chanel.
Yeah.
But Carl is very attracted to the future. He always says, I don't
Which
want
is
to be...
why I think the books are significant, because, you know, it's an analog just reference, you know, books, technology, you know, it's a real street. This is what's happening. I think there's all those juxtapositions with what he's trying to do digitally.
Yeah, and he loves books, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And if
He
you're
is
preserving
obsessed with
couture, which is about touch and luxury and it's
He's got the
experiential,
biggest collection of
books are exactly the same, aren't they?
And Coco Chanel was obsessed with books.
Yeah, she had a massive
It's a
library.
very good reference, yeah.
Yeah, and dreamt in her apartment. I mean, it was like she was an armchair traveller. She didn't travel, but she had these absolutely amazing books all in the apartment. And yeah, she dreamt of travelling.
She never traveled?
Not very much. She had the house in Switzerland where she went to, but she didn't travel in a way that other designers did. I mean, she didn't regularly go to America or anything,
Yeah.
in a way that Patou and other sort of contemporaneous designers did. But yeah, she dreamed, and books were one of those vehicles.
That's good. Here we can see some details of the hair and makeup.
These remind me of early teddy boy photographs, street photographs, and I can't think the name of the photographer. The street photographs from the early 50s of teddy boys in London and teddy girls.
That's quite funny reference. Teddy boy in London.
Roger May.
Yeah, there they are. Look at them.
Is it Roger Main? That was the photographer. But yeah, and sort of being situated on the street and...
It doesn't give the
Parallels.
name of photographer here. Virginia Turbet.
I don't know, but I think it's Roger Main as well. But
It's exactly the same
Yeah.
hairstyle.
I
Yeah.
suppose you could say that some of those longer length skirts and the silhouette are very kind of women's movement, early women's movement, you know, kind of suffragette era, kind of dark clothes, trying to be low-key, not selling on your feminism or your sexism, what have you. So I think there's a lot of subliminal messages in the clothing. You know, there's no cleavages or
No,
skin,
not at
it's
all.
not high necks.
yeah, they're not overtly
shouted
sexual, are they?
sex.
And you know, I think
That I like.
for us subliminally, that's why I think it looks very fresh. It looks like a new direction. It looks like a new embracing of dressing.
From what I've researched about Carl, I always find it quite funny how he'll make a really outrageous statement, and then later that year or the next year, that show will then be centered around something that was around the PC opposite of his comment. So talking about like movements, female movements, feminist movements, when he's quite outwardly, you know, being against the French equivalent of like the Me Too movement, and he's a relic of a time in which it was a lot less problematic to sexualize women. It was a lot easier just to be less politically correct. So I find him really confusing. I don't know if it's because his marketing team has said, okay, cool, you can't go on saying that anymore. Let's try and show that you're a bit more.
Yeah, he gets away
more-
with a lot compared to
He gets
others.
away with a lot, and I think that's because of his position within the sphere of fashion, you know. Because we look at him as pushing creativity in terms of design and art, which paradoxically is quite ironic because his personal views are quite traditional conservative. And I think that we as a society kind of excuse that because of his position and creativity, and we kind of think...
But it's showmanship too, isn't it? Because I met him years and years ago, and when I did a book, and he kept me waiting because he'd got someone to illustrate the clothes instead of photographing them, and I was fine to be kept waiting by him. And then he said, come and have lunch. And we sat and we talked, and I just thought, actually, he's this really kind of considered, incredibly clever man. So I mean, that's my only experience, but it's so different from the persona, so it is a lot about showmanship, isn't it?
Personally, it says it's a very different thing, but I must say that not knowing him personally, he really gets away with some...
Oh, really? Yeah, really risky.
And I also think there is a commercial thing
So do I.
I think
saying that Carl can say everything because Chanel is worth a lot of money for a lot of people.
Our society has always been obsessed with like these larger-than-life caricature characters, you know, and I think Carl is... He's a symbol of like fashion, how it was. He's like a relic of a time that was, in terms of his attitude within the socio-political landscape. And as you know, fashion moves forwards, it becomes more conscious. We move to an era in which designers are looking at their responsibility on the socio-political landscape. He's quite clearly becoming less and less
engaged.
Yeah, you know, his controversial comments about the use of fur, it's just, or his comments about feminist movements. I just think that we kind of have to hold ourselves responsible for letting him get away with it, because we might not necessarily agree with him, but we're still obsessed with him. We still share those tweets, share those comments. Did you see what he did today? Did you see what he did? I can't believe he did this, can't believe that. And you know, he'll get like a little bit of backlash online, but that's it. It won't be any further.
Not really. I mean, the press never attaches.
I meant us as in terms of the consumer, as in like the people that are in love with the brand that you know, come back season after season to.
I would say, as a young person, the reason why I probably wouldn't react to anything that he does is because I don't really find him particularly relevant at all in my life, or as a figure in any way. I'm much more inclined to be more enamoured by something that Vivienne Westwood might say that I would disagree with, because I find her more culturally relevant to me as a young person in the country now. But for someone like Karl Lagerfeld, he's so on an outer periphery of my mind that you don't ever kind of really care what they say, because he feels kind of like
he's remote.
a previous time in both in fashion but also within like culture. So
hold on a second. So you're saying that it can be politically incorrect?
Not necessarily. It's kind of just more like I don't really care what he says. It's
you overlook it.
Not on your radar. Okay.
I don't think he is really on many people.
Do you not think it's our responsibility to recognise he might not be on our radars personally, but he's on the radar? He's got a massive platform.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's been given that platform because of his creative endeavours and his talent. But if he's going to use that artistic platform to then talk on wider socio-political issues, we, as the consumer, have the right and have the responsibility to call him out for it. You know, I think artists...
I don't think people are doing that.
I think artists and artistic movements for a long, long time have tried to divorce themselves from being, from the landscape. They've tried to differentiate themselves, put themselves above politics and above society, so that they can comment on it. And I think everyone around here would agree to a certain extent that's a necessity. But when you use that platform and that privilege you've been given to then pass comment on things that you have no right to pass comment on.
And dismiss very important
and it's just for me, like, I don't know, it puts me in a bit of a predicament because I can appreciate what he does as a designer, but personally I think that he's got so much that he needs to kind of make right before it's a bit too late.
But I think someone like me, I don't really respect someone like Karl Lagerfeld's opinion on any of those things anyway, so that's why I wouldn't listen to it.
If your peers respect his opinion, people you surround yourself with...
He's very supportive of young designers, actually.
Yeah,
the Louis Vuitton Prize, he really gets to know the designers there. He's friendly with a lot of designers. He sends a lot of them flowers before their show that probably doesn't...
The one he likes, yeah.
...widely known. You know,
the one who's his friends.
He's very attuned with contemporary and he creates a lot of it. And I think that this issue that you're talking about, Tayler, is a really big problem with a lot of the designers, because they you know, some of them don't even know what they're supposed to be saying. Some of them claim to be ethical companies that are sustainable, and it's a load of rubbish. So it's almost like it's a lot of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, but between all the others and Dolce Gabbana or Carl that have said some outrageous things, I mean, there was this beautiful article by Vanessa Friedman in the New York Times probably last month, where she was saying it's only Donald Trump and Karl Lagerfeld that can get away, and she was quoting things. I mean, and some I didn't even notice. I'm like, whoa. And so, you know, I think there is a difference between pretending to be ethical and maybe, as you say, sometimes it's not really the truth, and getting away with saying things, and that's the power of the Chanel brand.
I think
not only the commercial power, but also the dream that the double C brings to people.
I think I almost respect about him is that if he gets called out for saying something, he won't then say, "Oh, I'm sorry, here's a PR statement."
Absolutely.
He will stick by it.
Yeah,
I don't agree with the majority of the things he says.
That's absolutely true.
As something, you just have to respect the fact that like they've said it and they meant it. Like they've apologized, but they're going to stick by it. And it's not this whole like, okay, cool, I've got to tick this box, tick this box. That's truly is, and you kind of like, you take him for it or you don't take him for it. I think that it's nice that we have the choice to be able to say, okay, cool, we respect you as a designer, but personally, I think you're not that great a person.
That's what you just said, right?
Yeah, I think, I think there's a real kind of mentality within a lot of older designers like Dolce & Gabbana, who are some of the most offensive designers, I think, in my opinion. I think there's a real kind of, they have a real comfortable nature about them that they can kind of be in this other world where they don't have to make comment and their PRs will deal with it. I think that's a real problem. But I don't think young people really care about what people like Karl Lagerfeld say. I really don't think they do. So therefore, as much as it's not good that he makes these comments and I find them offensive, like I do a lot of the other designers that make similar statements, I don't see my peer group or anyone around me really listening to what Karl Lagerfeld is saying.
Because you don't wear Chanel, because you don't care about the brand, probably.
No.
Yeah, but I think it is important because when he says something that's received in a negative way, people that you do respect will comment on it, and then you'll arrive. You'll read what they're thinking about him. So I think it does have a kind of effect on you as well. So Vanessa Friedman writing that, you know, you might not.
The New York Times, we're talking.
Yeah, exactly. So it has a really huge spread.
And also, as Tayler was saying, you know, when you are the creative director of Chanel for many years, of Fendi for many years, and you are Karl Lagerfeld, I mean, the king, you have the power to do good things as well. I mean, you have this big platform. You have so many people adoring you. All the people that know Karl or work around Karl, they love him. I mean, and everybody wants to be best friend with Karl. There must be something that I ignore because I'm not in his circle. And and so I would tell him, hold on a second, you have such a power. Why don't you use it in a better way than dismissing things that are important or saying things that, you know, maybe...
People can say the wrong thing as well. And I kind of prefer someone who is a fireball of contradiction than someone who is just spouting out what they're supposed to say. You know, I contradict myself all the time, and I kind of think that there's something quite fabulous about that. But you know, I think that people. I mean, I've had conversations with him over the years, and you know, I've seen a caring side of him. Let's put it that way. But you know, I don't think you should judge people too harshly on what they've said, because if he, like you say, he won't continue the conversation, so you don't really know what's underneath it.
But that's what's happening in the world. There are so many other people that have said less and they're out. So I don't want to discuss here what I think about that.
How many things do you think he's said that are contentious like that? Probably a handful of things that he's said.
I think there's like quite a lot. I think if you like Google like outrageous quotes, I think it's like top 100.
Thank you.
And like for anybody, that's a lot of like it's not outrageous if like that design is stupid. It's outrageous and like there's nothing more I hate than nasty, ugly men. Like it's just ridiculous. But I think that I find
comments like that so flippant. I don't take them seriously.
I kind of feel like he's almost like your eccentric old aunt in the corner. He's like the mad genius. You kind of accept all the amazing stuff he does, and then when he makes those comments, you don't really take it seriously. You're just like you text it to someone saying, "Oh my God, did you see this?" And you kind of everyone just laughs, and they just don't really take it seriously. It's almost.
Then why say it? Why say it? He's so successful and he does so much good. You know, he's done masses for the industry. He's preserved all those craft skills that could have just disappeared.
Created huge amount of jobs, which
absolutely.
Is
to that point, it's like.
So why do it?
If we had that sort of attitude, like look what happened to the United States. They ended up with Donald Trump. That sort of attitude. It's like if we let people in these positions get away with things, because they're crazy old kooks, they're a relic of their time. It's just then become the norm for society to adopt those and accept those.
I'm with you completely.
And I think that, going back to your point, if you were, not in this industry, not a young designer, if you were, say, I don't know, some completely like an engineer, and you're like, I don't care what this Karl Lagerfeld guy's got to say, fair enough. But as a young designer, whether or not you look up to him, and he's in your sphere, his influence, you've got to understand that he's at the very pinnacle of fashion, and what he says carries weight, and he's at time abusing his position and his power and neglecting the responsibilities that he has to convey the right social messaging.
But for me, I genuinely don't feel like people like Karl Lagerfeld, maybe they carry a weight in really important places that don't affect my life as a young designer, but for the people that affect my life as a young designer, I don't think people like Karl Lagerfeld carry any weight. I have kind of a alternative opinion on people like Karl Lagerfeld because I see them really as relics of kind of a fashion time that no longer exists. So I think when someone like Demna or someone at Gucci or someone that is actually leading the industry in my opinion, makes a comment, as a young designer, I'd be much more inclined to have a visceral reaction to that than I would be if it doesn't mean to say that the comments that Karl makes are right in any way, but I don't see them as being as relevant.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying.
I can see it too.
I can't really convey it in the right sense.
Well, I understand it's not even a choice. It's just a fact for you. It's not even, but it's not a choice that you make not to care. It's a fact. It doesn't.
I think it's just a bit flippant.
That's not what he says, though.
I think he is flippant. I think he might have conviction to some of those comments, but actually, you do have a lot of designers who probably think those things that actually behave in the right way with the media. So I think there's two sides to the coin.
Yeah, but that's I agree to disagree. I mean, it's like I can't decide what people think. It's the action that you're responsible for.
Of his influence on fashion, Fendi, Chanel, he's a living legend. So, I've got tremendous respect for that. I might not be engaging with Chanel as I would have thought I would in the last few years. But this show does blow me away.
Yeah, and that's a different thing. That I understand. The living legend, I mean, John was a living legend, and he had to atone for 5 years, and still sometimes he carries the weight of...
A lot of people still hold that. A lot of people still can't,
I know, and he is a living legend too in fashion.
We haven't all got an Anna Wintour to kind of help us,
No, and Chanel had to hide, didn't she, after the war? I mean, she had to go to
Coco
Switzerland for like 9 or more years.
The roots of the brand is steeped in controversy before he's even entered the picture.
Who, sorry?
Coco Chanel.
Yeah. But, it wasn't planned to go in that direction, but it went. So it's obviously something that it's important to some people. So we love the collection.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it was really strong. There are certain pieces that I think were stronger than others, but generally as a collection and as a show, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I like elements of it. I like the split sleeves, I like the layered skirts. I think the materiality is probably really, really beautiful, and I'd love to see it. I think the detailing, I want to see the braids and the embroidery and, and the weave of the textiles, and I bet they're absolutely wonderful. And also see the insides of the garments, where you just get a glimpse of, a silvery or a flesh-toned silk, and they're the ultimate kind of luxury garments. I quite like the palette in grey, but the thing is, it is just for the show, isn't it? Because you're only ever going to see them individually as outfits, and we're looking at them en masse.
A lot of people at the show were saying there was a lot of silver, and I think we're not really picking that up.
No,
yeah.
I think that's always quite modernist when you have that highlighting.
I do, it's like metallic, and I agree.
Well, thank you very much. And so let's see what Karl's us next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.